What a fitting time to be talking about OT security. Because right now, not just at Pfizer, but at pharma companies around the world, there are hundreds of manufacturing lines that are using thousands of OT devices. They're producing millions of doses of COVID vaccines. And in the end, that's the path back to normalcy for 7 billion people. And as this audience knows better than anyone, each one of those doses, the ones that'll be taken by us, by our friends, and by our families, they're reliant on continuous, uninterrupted, and secure operation of both OT and IT technology. And so this morning, I'll talk through some of the lessons learned that we've experienced in ensuring that that particular mission continues. From research to production to global deployment, what are the things that I'd recommend starting right now? What would I ask that we as a community stop doing? And what should we all continue to focus on when it comes to securing a global network of critical assets? And so to start, I'd say the number one question that I typically get asked when people learn that I work at Pfizer is, what's the past year been like? And as much as I could use words like sleepless or hectic or intense, the single best word that I would use to summarize the past 12 months is connection. It's the connection that we felt to the purpose of Pfizer, which is to deliver breakthroughs that change patients' lives. And perhaps one of the best ways to sort of describe that feeling is actually an anecdote about JFK. So shortly after the "We choose to go to the moon" speech, the famous speech, JFK is visiting NASA headquarters for the very first time. He's touring the facility, he's touring the hallways, and on his tour, he comes across a custodian who's mopping the floor, walks up and introduces himself and says, what do you do here at NASA? Custodian pauses, puts the mop down, looks him in the eye and says, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. That's it, right? That's the feeling. That's the feeling of being connected to a vision and a mission and a purpose behind a goal as big as landing on the moon, or in our case, a goal of delivering a cure to the world at the speed of science. And that is the first thing that I would start right now. It is start building that connection. Build a connection to the broader purpose of the company for your security team. Because no matter what industry you're in, these are not simply OT assets that we must protect. They represent a product or a solution, or in some cases, a cure that is truly important to a human being. And we saw at Pfizer how that connection to the mission really changed the dialogue for our team. Because for us, we realized that we're part of a global team of scientists and researchers and manufacturers who had this singular goal to deliver a vaccine for planet Earth. And so that meant every single decision that we made was through the lens of how we can enable the business, how do we do it in a secure way, and how do we accomplish this collective goal at speed. And so for security, it meant that we had to develop new design patterns for data and for connectivity and for collaboration, right? Picture the world. We've got 90% of our workforce at home, and yet we've got plants running 24/7, research facilities running 24/7, and you need to ensure seamless operation of those principles without violating any of your risk tolerances. We had to develop new ways to automate the end user experience so that we weren't holding back the testing of a new device or an application that had to be deployed, right? Can you imagine if we said to the business, hey, hold on those new freezers while we schedule you in for some testing, or, wait to deploy that trial application until we get to you to do the testing? Of course not. We had a seat at the table with the senior business leaders, and we were unified. Their priorities became our priorities and vice versa. And so that's my first piece of advice. Start working to make sure that your security team realizes they're not defending Delta V systems or controllers or data historians. They're defending the products, the energy production, the food, the medicine that we all depend on. And once you've built that connection to the mission, then the second thing to start is actually measure what matters. Focus on metrics that measure effectiveness versus things that just simply measure effort. Because I promise, and we all know this is true, it is really easy to be busy every single day in cybersecurity, right? Not hard to fill a calendar. But when you start measuring where you're actually effective, and then conversely, start to illuminate areas where you actually need work, it enhances your ability to make positive and strategic choices about the future of your program. And to make my point, maybe it's actually best to start with some of the metrics that I hate the most, right? The ones that I really just don't like. And these are the ones that only measure effort. And I'll give you two. So two of my least favorite metrics are how many tickets did we work this quarter and how long did it take to close a ticket? Because here's one thing I can promise you. I promise that quarter over quarter, we could choose to work a ton of low priority tickets and build up our numbers. And we could do junky analysis and we could close those tickets quickly and honestly not have made any difference whatsoever in protecting Pfizer. What's harder is focusing on measuring the things that actually matter and then choosing to spend your time there. The things that tell you you're actually getting better at your craft. And for me, that comes down to finding metrics that look at that effectiveness. And I'll give you a couple. So time to mitigation versus time to closure, right? I said I don't like one just measuring closure, but we do need to keep urgency in this. This is an important mission that we have. And so timeliness in our craft matters, but we also want to balance that quality. So after we've scoped the issue properly, how long did it take for us to stop that root cause? But then I don't want you to close it. I want you to dig. I want you to pivot. I want you to learn so that our analysts can spend time really understanding how the incident occurred and we can go fix some systemic challenges along the way versus just reimaging a device, which we all know we're going to then fight the same issue next week and next month. At the same time, measure how it happens, right? What is the root cause of how the incident occurred in the first place? Because if you got that, if you can get back to root cause, it'll tell you two things. One, it'll tell you that your analysts are actually able to pivot back through data to get a common understanding of an incident, which is an important skill set and important to the security of the company. But then also helps you go fix the problem. And you can really then go get at the crux of tackling the next big thing. And for all of us, especially as we talk about the OT world and the manufacturing world, be honest with yourself. Measure the depth of visibility that you have for your security tools. Where are your blind spots? Where can you see? How far down in a particular stack are you able to have visibility? And know that. And then work relentlessly to continue to improve. And I know not all metrics are right for every security program. But for each item that you do measure, take the time to look yourself in the mirror and decide if it's actually measuring the right things. Is it measuring something that's going to help you get better? And if it is, make sure that then you have the data and the process and the discipline to go make it a repeatable metric so that you can measure it over time. And so if we're willing to start asking ourselves those difficult questions, right? If we're willing to be honest with ourselves about how effective we are, then I'd say it's also time to start asking our suppliers some of those same tough questions as well. And as you might expect, across Pfizer, we have tens of thousands of suppliers that contribute to our combined success. It's everything from supporting clinical trials to supporting firmware updates on the manufacturing equipment. And it's also likely not surprising that we've seen a substantial year-over-year increase in the number of suppliers that have been impacted by cyber attacks. These are data breaches, operational disruptions, full-scale ransomware attacks. You've seen headlines. Many of you have probably experienced these for your own supplier base as it's grown over time. And it's no longer enough to just rely on contractual protections or to ask a supplier this sort of vanilla set of questions about, do you apply patches on a regular basis? Because I promise they apply their patches and they're going to tell you that they do. And of course, strong contractual agreements help and they clarify liabilities when a bad day happens. But collectively, we all want that bad day to never occur in the first place, whether for ourselves or for our suppliers. And so let's start asking suppliers the tough questions, which, by the way, are likely the same questions that we're already asking ourselves. As we continue to learn about root cause, how we learn about how incidents happen, fold those into the questions that you're continuing to ask your supplier base so that you can help drive them forward, help them evolve their security posture. We've recently added some questions into how we interact with suppliers. We want to know, are they enforcing multi-factor authentication, not just for users, but on VPN and in cloud applications and in O365? Are they doing that everywhere? Do their admins, right, the ones that have elevated permissions, the ones that are likely coming into our facility to do maintenance, do they use separate credentials for their critical work versus just the normal business activity? Because if they don't have those separation of duties fundamentally as a corporation, they may be bringing risk into yours. Do they conduct robust security application testing on every single code update, not just major functionality changes? And then all the way to cultural elements. Are they tagging external emails so that their colleagues know to take extra care when they're opening up an email from the outside world? Of course, I could go on, but getting at these core questions, these ones that really matter, they help you guide the business in their selection of a vendor. And maybe that's a little bit utopian, right? I understand we don't always get to choose or influence the vendors that the business is going to go with. But what it also lets us do as security practitioners, lets us guide the types of security overlays and controls that you place around these vendors who don't meet the standards. For instance, if they're not enforcing multi-factor on their environment, then they don't get to have connectivity to yours. And so those areas are some of the areas where I'd recommend starting today. Build the connection to the mission, measure what matters, and hold your suppliers to the same rigor that you hold yourself to. But of course, right, if I talk about a couple of things that we should start doing, then the universe requires balance. And so I also have to talk about some of the things that we should stop doing. And the first one of those, and I can't say this enough, stop hoarding data. All right, say it with me, it's kind of cathartic, right? We are not the NSA. This is not classified data. Well, at least maybe for some of you, it's not classified data. We spend a ton of time, money, and effort on aggregating logs, on pulling in device information, on creating security alerts and behavioral data detections. We pull all of that into one location. And then we as security practitioners, we love more than anything to put a huge keep out sign on the front of that data warehouse, lock it with a padlock, and keep it solely for ourselves. And the honest truth is that's self-limiting. Instead, use that data to empower others to take action. For instance, walk with me on a journey here for a moment. Typical day, single alert comes in the sea of alerts that are going to come to your SOC team that day. The antivirus tool that you use, it's successfully deleted some low risk, older commodity piece of malware from a USB drive that was put into a laptop at a manufacturing plant, right? Typical type of day, but for any large enterprise, this is not necessarily an all hands on deck moment. The tool, the antivirus, it did what it was supposed to do. The red light in the SOC probably isn't flashing at this point in time. And if that alert simply went to the security team, which it should, but likely it's going to fall to the bottom of a queue in terms of priority. But instead, if that same alert is also exposed to the right partners at a manufacturing plant, they can choose to take action at real time. They can go find that USB device. For all I care, they can go smash it with a hammer. They can then also relook at the processes that they're using for transferring files. They can look at the security controls that they've put in place. They can drive change from within. And that is where the true response scale comes from that unified fight. And so my ask is, as you think through your data models, think through the lens of what would help others become a champion of security. Couple ones where we've seen some positive benefits. We spend a lot of time aggregating inventory data. Of course, we all do that. It's necessary. But we've started to illuminate that inventory to our plant managers, where they now can be told where do they have potential risk from end of life or near end of life systems. And we use that to open a dialogue about potential options, because the option's not always just go modernize it. We get it. Capitalization takes years. but segmentation, application controls, the data unlocks the dialogue. Through vulnerability management data, we can show system owners, of course, where they're out of compliance with the latest patch versions. But more importantly, we can help them understand where that same patch on the same system has been applied successfully somewhere else in one of our facilities. Manufacturing plants, in a lot of ways, get to control their own destiny. And by linking together and showing success stories, you empower others to take bolder steps. And through security data, we've helped our site teams understand where there's potential cultural issues. For instance, that same operator I talked about earlier that put the USB drive in, let's say they're on an HMI device and they try accessing their Gmail account for some reason. Now, of course, through segmentation and protections, the activity is going to be blocked, so it would never reach a SOC team. But exposing the attempt, letting folks know that, hey, someone tried this, can indicate cultural sort of risky behaviors that can be addressed locally at a site. And so getting the data into the hands of those who can use it really does act as a force multiplier for your broader security efforts. And this same idea, the idea of looking holistically and unlocking data, doesn't just apply to what we have, but it also applies to the technology choices that we make. And so that leads me to my next thing we should stop doing. As a community, we need to stop window shopping, or at least we need to go window shopping a little less often. I'm convinced shiny object syndrome, this idea of always looking at the next new thing, is a true disease in the security community. And unfortunately, Pfizer, we're not working on a cure for this one. But we have an ongoing strategy at Pfizer where we're trying to work with fewer logos over time, fewer partners over time, and thereby maximizing the value and the integration and the ability to influence roadmaps for each and every partner that we do business with. In general, it allows us to then focus on gluing technology together in seamless ways. It keeps us from looking at narrow point solutions and niche products that would sort of put us in these silos of operation. And without a doubt, it has helped maximize the return on investment for our security dollars that we spend. But I'd say just as importantly, it also serves as a call to action for our partners. You have to be open. An API first mindset is key. Does your particular technology open up every single field and command and function through an API so that me, my team as end users, so that we can link and automate these tools together? It's amazing, but when I sit through a technology demo, every provider wants to start by showing how beautiful their visualizations are. The antivirus, it did what it was supposed to do. The red light in the SOC probably isn't flashing at this point in time. And if that alert simply went to the security team, which it should, but likely it's going to fall to the bottom of a queue in terms of priority. But instead, if that same alert is also exposed to the right partners at a manufacturing plant, they can choose to take action at real time. They can go find that USB device. For all I care, they can go smash it with a hammer. They can then also relook at the processes that they're using for transferring files. They can look at the security controls that they've put in place. They can drive change from within. And that is where the true response scale comes from that unified fight. And so my ask is, as you think through your data models, think through the lens of what would help others become a champion of security. Couple ones where we've seen some positive benefits. We spend a lot of time aggregating inventory data. Of course, we all do that. It's necessary. But we've started to illuminate that inventory to our plant managers, where they now can be told where do they have potential risk from end of life or near end of life systems. And we use that to open a dialogue about potential options, because the option's not always just go modernize it. We get it. Capitalization takes years, but segmentation, application controls, the data unlocks the dialogue. Through vulnerability management data, we can show system owners, of course, where they're out of compliance with the latest patch versions. But more importantly, we can help them understand where that same patch on the same system has been applied successfully somewhere else in one of our facilities. Manufacturing plants, in a lot of ways, get to control their own destiny. And by linking together and showing success stories, you empower others to take bolder steps. And through security data, we've helped our site teams understand where there's potential cultural issues. For instance, that same operator I talked about earlier that put the USB drive in, let's say they're on an HMI device and they try accessing their Gmail account for some reason. Now, of course, right, through segmentation and protections, the activity is going to be blocked, so it would never reach a SOC team. But exposing the attempt, letting folks know that, hey, someone tried this, can indicate cultural sort of risky behaviors that can be addressed locally at a site. And so getting the data into the hands of those who can use it really does act as a force multiplier for your broader security efforts. And this same idea, the idea of looking holistically and unlocking data, doesn't just apply to what we have, but it also applies to the technology choices that we make. And so that leads me to my next thing we should stop doing. As a community, we need to stop window shopping, or at least we need to go window shopping a little less often. I'm convinced shiny object syndrome, this idea of always looking at the next new thing, is a true disease in the security community. And unfortunately, Pfizer, we're not working on a cure for this one. But we have an ongoing strategy at Pfizer where we're trying to work with fewer logos over time, fewer partners over time, and thereby maximizing the value and the integration and the ability to influence roadmaps for each and every partner that we do business with. In general, it allows us to then focus on gluing technology together in seamless ways. It keeps us from looking at narrow point solutions and niche products that would sort of put us in these silos of operation. And without a doubt, it has helped maximize the return on investment for our security dollars that we spend. But I'd say just as importantly, it also serves as a call to action for our partners. You have to be open. An API first mindset is key. Does your particular technology open up every single field and command and function through an API so that me, my team as end users, so that we can link and automate these tools together? It's amazing, but when I sit through a technology demo, every provider wants to start by showing how beautiful their visualizations are, the flashy maps and the lines flying across the screens. But here's the secret. I don't care, right? I know that makes me a terrible human being, but I just don't care. Because if our security team had to go to every console at our disposal, we would get nothing done. Imagine you log into the firewall console that morning, then the ICS firewall console, then the antivirus console, then your inventory console, right? You get the idea. Do us the favor and unlock the data from your tool so that we can choose how and where to use it. And I know, a world without flashy attack maps and spinning globes with heat maps sounds really, really boring. But it turns out boring matters. And that's where I want to head next in this morning's discussion. Let's talk about some of the behaviors that we are all already doing. And honestly, maybe they're not the most flashy, maybe they're not the most exciting, but these are some of the areas that I feel are worth doubling down on and continuing. And my first one is continue to focus on the boring stuff. As uninteresting as it sounds, I truly believe that the future of security will continue to rely on getting the fundamentals right. In the next 3 to 5 years, I don't see this AI engine or machine learning algorithm that's coming to solve all of our problems for us. And when you look at global headlines, or you look introspectively at your own incidents, it turns out that a large majority of these issues aren't caused by Hollywood-style attacks, right? They're just not. They're caused because an attacker is able to exploit some fundamental weakness in a company's security posture. And so we at Pfizer, we place a lot of emphasis on continuing to get really good at those fundamentals, at those foundational elements that collectively we as a security community already know are problems. And honestly, many of these will never be done. They are life's work. We focus heavily on building inventory and continuing to build visibility into our surface area, knowing full well that it is never going to be perfect, but we keep driving. We drive through all layers of the network, from the enterprise to manufacturing to the plant floor. And then we go back up and out into the cloud, into suppliers, into the dependencies that our software relies on, building that inventory and continuing to know our surface area. We focus on applying patches where we can, and knowing we can't do it everywhere, segmenting and compensating controls where we can. We look heavily at identities, multi-factor everything that we can, limit the blast radius of service accounts, ensure admins are conducting themselves in proper ways, right? I get it. These aren't the most exciting things to do. In the history of cyber, nobody has ever high-fived their coworker because they applied a patch within the established timeline. Hasn't happened, probably never will. But when you do that action, and then you magnify it 1,000 times a day across the entire enterprise, turns out it really does matter. It counts. And like I said, I don't see this AI machine learning robot coming to save us anytime soon. So we better keep working to save ourselves. And if it's not going to be the robots, then we should probably get to the final item today, which is let's continue to invest in talent. Invest in people that care, invest in people that are curious, and then get out of the way. Empower them to go make huge contributions, because every success that we've had in our security program is based on that principle. Whether we're hiring senior architect or a junior analyst, we look for this balance of technical skills, of communication, but most importantly, we look for characteristics of independent thinking, because our goal isn't to hire people that can just follow this playbook. We want to hire someone that's going to improve it, rewrite it, or better yet, someone that's going to look at the playbook and say, I can automate that. Those are the thinkers, right? Those are the thinkers who ask themselves, why do we do it this way? And then they go figure out how to do it some way better. We've seen automations created for things that we all do, right? Create data collections for incidents so artifacts are waiting for an analyst. But we've also seen automations that have really driven us forward. The ability to automate ways to place assets on heightened monitoring lists so that we can bubble up trends and bubble up and alerts to an analyst's attention at a moment's notice, which has been especially important during the COVID-19 response, knowing what assets are involved and getting those alerts or potential issues to the top of the queue. We've automated things as simple as daily incident notes so that they come out in this magazine style format to the entire of our security team so we stay connected. But more importantly, we send them to our manufacturing partners so they can maintain awareness of what's actually going on and what we're seeing when it comes to daily incidents. In addition to just empowering the talent and letting them go, we also want to continue to focus on growing them. So of course, like everyone, we focus on trainings and going to important courses and certifications and conferences like this one. But we've also implemented programs where they are not just encouraged, but required to take short rotations throughout the year with other security groups in the company. So this might mean you have a forensic analyst who spends time in architecture, or a vulnerability management lead goes and does some IR work for a few weeks. It served us really well, not only to provide cross-training and skill development, but also to bolster trust and build culture across that global team. Because in the end, it's the talent that's going to continue to drive this security program forward. And quite honestly, it's also been the hardest part of the past year, not getting to see the team in person, not getting to come around a whiteboard, to celebrate the wins, to commiserate the setbacks. To have this type of conversation with all of you in person, these are truly the things that I personally miss the most. But as we come through this challenging year, I do have some good news. And the good news is we're never going to go back to the way things were. And what that means for us is that collectively, we get to decide what's best for our security programs in the new reality that we're entering. How are we going to connect our people to the mission? How will we focus and measure what matters? Will we choose to stop hoarding data and allow others to join us in the fight? Will we focus on fundamentals while still investing in talent so that they can take us to the next big thing? These are some of the exciting questions that we now collectively get to face. And as you go through today's agenda, I have no doubt that you'll hear some amazing ideas on how to solve them. But perhaps the single most important question that we all get to start asking ourselves is, which arm should I get the vaccine in? And making that question a reality, getting to see the speed of science firsthand, has truly been one of the best experiences of my career. Thank you all very much for your time this morning, and enjoy the rest of your day.